Our next guest is Joshua Gans. Joshua is the Jeffrey S. Skoll Chair of Technical Innovation and Entrepreneurship at the University of Toronto's Rotman School of Management. And we have a very interesting question on the table with Joshua. The question is to disrupt or not to disrupt. Joshua, welcome to our symposium.
Hi, it's good to be here.
As you know, Clay thought a great question was even more important than a great answer, because framing the questions properly was the best way to actually get to new and better insights. So you've asked a question, to disrupt or not to disrupt. Your article makes the point that disruption is a choice. What do you mean by that?
Well, the reason, it's not a question that I ask and answer. It is a question that any startup firm should ask themselves, whether they want to be a disruptor or not a disruptor. I'm getting distracted by my buffering webcam, so we're getting disrupted right here, whether I want it or not. So the issue is the traditional picture of a disruptor is there's an industry that sort of stayed in its ways, hasn't changed very much for some period of time, and then it basically ends up going. There's an opportunity that emerges because of some things, and essentially the issue is that, so you've got a state industry, a startup firm comes in, and the idea is they apply this new technology that incumbents there are slow to get into, and they do it with a view to shaking things up. The point I make, however, in my article is that you can bring a new technology to an industry, but whether you choose to shake up that industry or try to find a path whereby existing firms in that industry would adopt that technology and its practices are two different things. And so, every startup, I've come across hundreds from my work with the Creative Destruction Lab here at the University of Toronto. Every startup has that same set of choices. And so we don't see it as, oh, there's only one way to be a startup. And I think some of the earlier literature on disruptive innovation tended to think that way. Oh, only disruptors make it. That's actually not true at all. In fact, the article opens with a case from 20 years ago where that wasn't true. That was the case where the technological opportunity was online. E-commerce had come into being, and different startups had the idea that you would be able to order your groceries online. As a result of that, two different startups, the point two, came into being. One was Webvan. Webvan was the disruptive mode. Webvan said, oh, e-commerce is here. People need to get groceries to their house. Why do we need these supermarkets anymore? We should just get rid of them. They're costly, they're expensive. We can deliver everything cheaper to consumers without going through that. The second part of it was, could I turn my, sorry, I'm getting questions in the middle of this. Unfortunately, without disengaging entirely, and coming back in, I can't do anything. So tell me if you want me to do that. Webvan wanted to get rid of supermarkets entirely. Another startup at the same time had the same basic idea using e-commerce to order groceries, and that was called Peapod. And what they did was they sent shoppers down to the supermarkets to do shopping on your behalf. Now, that was an activity that's more costly than you going yourself, but it was something that allowed supermarkets to take advantage of the new developments, but supermarkets would still exist. Now, we know what happened there. What happened there was that Webvan burned through $1 billion of cash and went bankrupt less than a year after its IPO. Peapod ended up doing quite well and then became a fully owned subsidiary of Ahold, which owns Shop and Stop. So Webvan and Peapod, they were two different firms. They produced markedly different strategies. In that particular instance, the one pursuing the disruptive strategy to wipe out the incumbent firms was, in fact, it did in fact not succeed. In this particular, but in other cases, it can be very different, such as in bookselling. It was very different. Bookselling, Amazon wasn't the first online bookselling. In fact, what happened was there were some other ones called one called Bookstack and other ones like that actually partnered with existing bookstores and were doing these sort of Peapod type thing. And then Amazon decided to go over the top of all of that. And we know which one won out there. So the point I make in the article is it's very much a choice. It's not obvious which way is the right way to go. It may never be obvious which way the right way to go is. So but the point is that you as an entrepreneur have options. And so that's really the theme I'm trying to push.
So how do you then consider those options? I definitely want to get us to talking about now in current context, but let's take what you wrote about in the article in SMR. How do you then make a decision about which path to take, which options to take as you're thinking about being an entrepreneur and starting up?
Well, the way I would do that is, and it's a way that myself and Scott Stern and Erin Scott have been writing a textbook about, and that is that you should, whenever you're formulating a business plan or a strategy for your startup, you should not formulate just one business plan. Oh, I'm going to be Uber for dog grooming. Because that already sort of binds you into not only a path, but a set of who your customers are going to be, what technology you're going to use, what organization you're going to have, etc. Instead, what you should do is you should basically formulate two business plans. You should outline, if I'm going to be a disruptor, what should my business look like? What are the things I should emphasize? Which customers should I target? Who is my real competition? And if I'm not going to be a disruptor, and I'm going to try and say slot myself into the value chain, as Peapod did, then who am I going to be cooperating with? What sort of relationships do I have to build? That sort of thing. And those are two very different business plans. And for many entrepreneurs, even when formulating those two business plans, it won't be obvious which one to go, and it'll end up being something akin to a gut choice, or maybe something that their investors tend to favor, or maybe they never saw themselves as anything other than a disruptor, so it's going to be disrupting. But we encourage people to do two business plans. Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about that. So you encourage them to do two business plans. What are the significant differences between option A and option B in terms of how you do the business plan?
Well, the differences come on 4 different sets of choices that you have to make for any startup. The first choice you'd have is your choice of who's going to be your target initial customer. You have to, startups have to start somewhere. You can't so easily start with the world. You have to say, what's my customer going to look like? And you could actually see these choices play out in the Webvan versus the Peapod ads. The Webvan ads were all about how horrible it is to go to a supermarket. So they were targeting people who didn't like going to the supermarket, and they were betting on that being everybody. Whereas Peapod, who were they targeting? Well, if you look back at the ads there, they were targeting basically working professionals, or in particular, working women professionals. People who were tasked with doing the shopping but didn't have time to do it. So there's very different customers being targeted there. One was sort of a premium customer, time poor working professionals. The other was very mass market customer. So those are 2 distinct groups where to start your business, and you right down to the ads will choose different things for those. The other The other set of set of choices, the second set, is your choice of technology, and by what we mean is sort of how you go about your business. With say Webvan, if you're going to make this work, that you're going to deliver all these groceries to people at very low cost, your technology is going to emphasize logistics. It's going to emphasize being able to have a distribution network that is able to farm out to individual homes and react quickly. Whereas for Peapod, your technology is going to be, well, I've got to train these shoppers to go down, and how do I make sure they make the right calls on what people actually want to have? It's actually quite a difficult problem. Very different technology. So you have a different choices there. Your third choice that you have differently is, of course, who's your competition? So with Webvan, it was like everybody. Well, it was all the supermarkets. They were their competition. They were out to get them. With Peapod, on the other hand, that definitely wasn't their competition. They needed the supermarkets and they needed them to do well. Their competition was people who wanted to, rather than buy their service, go to the supermarket themselves. So it's kind of like their own potential customers, and there's nothing wrong with that. So your choice of competition is different. And then finally, your choice of organization. Your choice of organization is, you as a startup firm can't do everything. So you have to prioritize what you're going to be good at. And in many ways, that follows from all those other choices. With Webvan, it was going to have to be logistics and getting things at low cost. With Peapod, it was going to have to be making sure that when you did shopping on somebody's behalf, they were happier with that outcome than going to the store themselves. And by the way, that's a huge problem. I mean, today, Instacart still faces that problem. And other things like that. You really have to, this is a thing that's very difficult to solve. So those are the four choices. And so you have to build out a plan addressing all of those. And they can be quite distinct depending on whether you're intending to disrupt or not.
Joshua, is one path or the other more difficult if you're deciding based on your business plan A or business plan B that you do want to be a disruptor? If you have a good answer for 3 of your 4 questions, is that good enough, or is being a disruptor, it's all in, all those things have to work, or you should consider taking the value chain path?
You have to no, not at all. You have to make those choices for everything you've got. You have to make those choices for everything you've got. So you're making those choices whether you think about it or not. And if you don't think about it, you'll probably make them badly. The key thing about being a disruptor or being value chain and getting it all right is making sure those choices make sense with each other, that they're somewhat compatible. I mean, if Webvan said, we're going after everybody, but we're not going to emphasize logistics, that would be stupid. So you have to sort of have these things meshed. So where you start is, of course, another matter. Most people start with the customer they're trying to target, but some people start with the competition, who they really want to get as the motivating thing, and sort of building all this out. And so it doesn't really matter. That's up to the individual entrepreneur, but eventually you've got to go through all those 4 choices. You got to make a call on each of them, and then you've got to separately. Oops, have I lost everyone again? Have I lost you again? Are you back?
Oh, I'm
Am I
back.
here?
Sorry, can you hear me? Can you hear me okay?
The whole existential thing. I don't know if I exist in the world.
Sorry. It's anyway, limitations. I'm going to ask you a question.
I don't
We have
know
a
why
lot of
this
audience questions. We have a lot of audience questions. I'm going to try to throw
Okay,
them at you. They're all over the place, but they're good ones. So I'm just going to go for it. To disrupt or not to disrupt, how about the importance of small scale testing of your choices hypothesis?
All ventures have to test. They've just got different hypotheses. So let's think about, if you choose to be a disruptor, you have to have a hypothesis of how you're going to create value for the customers you choose, and a hypothesis of how you're going to capture that value. So to be a disruptor, you've got to make sure is, are you going to create value? Am I going to be able to deliver the quality that people expect, which might be lower than current quality, the quality they expect at a cost that is low enough? That's the hypothesis. And so I have to test that hypothesis. And one way I test that is see if I can do it through, say, a minimum viable product or something like that. The second hypothesis you also have to have is, am I going to make any money doing this? So if I have this great new product and I'm satisfying these consumers and delivering it, well, if the incumbents all wake up and then crush me, well, that's not going to be that too good. So I have to have a hypothesis there. If I'm a disruptor, I'm going to intend to make money out of it, then the incumbents are going to have to be sluggish. That's a little harder to test, by the way. It's hard to test because the incumbents, you know, if you wake the Kraken, you're in big trouble. Now, so what a lot of disruptive strategies have is that they try it out on a niche market first that the incumbents aren't paying much attention to, and then see if those hypotheses hold, and then they try to scale up from there. But you have to have test hypothesis in any training. If you're not going to be a disruptor, you still have to do it. I mean, it may be that if you found out as Webvan that no one wants to pay a premium to have somebody go do shopping on your behalf, or they just can't do it well enough, and it proves out more frustrating, you know, that's a hypothesis that you're testing when running that startup. So you're not going to roll this out across the country to do that. You're going to run it in a locality first to see if you can really deliver that. So all startups involve hypotheses. One or the other doesn't matter.
So Webvan may have been 20 years ahead of its time, right? Because right now we might have been grateful for that. Let's talk about how the current.
Just to mention, we got it. Webvan's assets ended up being acquired by Amazon, and Amazon is essentially what Webvan was.
For so much more, right? So maybe that was a beta test, and it got, so yeah, we all completely rely on it. Well, let's talk about what do we know now, and talking about the uncertainty and doing plans. It's very, very difficult, I would imagine, to plan anything right now. What do you think the current environment does to someone thinking about plan A, plan B, choice A, choice B? What are we going to see, and how do they need to think differently?
Well, I've done a lot of thinking about that, and let's go to plugging mode. Tomorrow, MIT Press, the publisher of this fine journal, Sloan Management Review, is publishing my book, Economics in the Age of COVID-19. It goes through a lot of the issues that are facing, including innovation. So I've just sent that into the chat. I don't know if that goes, or maybe I can send it to everybody somehow, so everybody can see the link for that. Economics in the Age of COVID-19. But it's really true. Whatever's going on now is going to have a big impact on how we think about innovation. So let me give you some principles associated with that. If you're going to launch a venture, that is so there are two sorts of ventures and technological opportunities that have been opened up by our current disaster. If you imagine the world has currently got a whole lot of activities that have been moved from what we would call an unrestricted bucket, where people could just do them freely, to a restricted bucket where you can't. And so what does that mean? That means that there's two opportunities. One opportunity is we can make this stuff in the restricted bucket, as we're currently trying to do here, better. And obviously there is room for improvement, we can see right now. We can make that better. And so there will be innovations like that. And some of those innovations were previous. I guess GoToMeeting here and Zoom and others helping us being able to work from home, those sorts of things. But there may well be more of that. Of how to do that. I believe some people would look very favorably on a device that was a mute button for children. Anyhow, so you could imagine a lot of innovations that could be predicated on making it easy to work from home, and who knows how long we're going to be doing that, but it could be upwards of 12 to 18 months. Other innovations could be, how do we make it safe for us to move activities out of that restricted bucket and put them into the unrestricted. And so those are innovations that make it less likely that you'll infect people by those businesses. So we can imagine whole lots of protective gear, we can have testing, we can imagine all sorts of things, sterilization, etc. There's a raft of stuff. And at the Creative Destruction Lab, we are trying to encourage ventures along those lines, who are going to be able to do those things, to take things that are currently dangerous and make them safe. And so those are the two technological opportunities in the current environment. But here's the thing. Those opportunities are going to be really bad businesses if things work out well in the world. It turns out that the virus can be contained and it goes away quickly and it isn't fatal as we thought and isn't as damaging, etc. Your business is based on COVID-19 are toast. On the other hand, if it turns out to be much worse than expected, those businesses are going to do really well. Now, that's a very, very morbid way of looking at the world. I realize that, but it makes it no less true. The good news, the only comforting thing I can say about that is, you know, if you launch a business and it turns out to be the good outcome for the world, well, you know, that's just good. You should just feel happy that it was the good outcome for the world. If you launch a business and the world is much worse, well, you're helping making it a little less worse.
I like that thinking, actually. I think that's sort of a win-win, although it will be very interesting to see what opportunities arise in the next, 18 months, 2 years. Is there advice you would give a company that doesn't fit into that category?
And hopefully I'm back because I'm getting winked out. I hope that answers that question. Unless I've been kicked off entirely.
Joshua, it's Paul. We can still hear you.
Oh, you can still hear me. Okay, good. Okay, all right. I'm ready for the next question.
Sorry, am I back?
Oh, Karen has no sound.
I went down. I'm sorry, Joshua. I went down. I was just saying, any sort of pearls of wisdom for a company or aspiring entrepreneur who doesn't fall into that category of potentially saving the world, making the world a safer place. What else can they think about so that the world doesn't pass them by in the next 18 months or 2 years?
You know, innovation takes time. So the chances are for most stuff that the world opens up in 12 to 18 months and you are ready to go. I mean, look, there are a lot of people trying to look for things to do. And a lot of the activities that we are hoping will be there straight into the future. Look, if you are launching a business that is going to do great in movie cinemas, like a new form of popcorn for movie cinemas that you're trying to distribute it that way, that's not going to be great now. But if you, on the other hand, in biotechnology, or you're offering new work tools or any other things that you were doing previously, if you were in AI, it's business as usual. What's the big difference? Not a lot of our businesses have been innovating that are critically dependent on people being able to be out and about. So that's the good news. The other great news is that money is cheap at the moment, dirt cheap. A lot of countries are actually putting up money to help startups go through these environments. So there is opportunity there. Not only that, there's a whole lot of developers and other things that are currently out of work or not able to do their stuff, and you can hire them. So, this is one of those situations where it's kind of seems bleak, but if you sort of sit down and sit back, you can work a way through. It is possible to do that.
Let me thank you for that. Let me ask you one more viewer question because we've got a lot, and I'll have to cherry pick because there's so many here. How about this one? How do you disrupt a traditional cast in stone model such as lockstep, partnership-driven old world law firms? The legal service industry is ripe for disruption. I believe that's true. If only we could find the right set of tools and inject fresh thinking. So how do you think about disrupting when it's not a product, it's not a service?
Yeah, so that's interesting. I've seen a lot of legal tech firms, and legal tech firms are very interesting. They, for instance, these AI ones that can automate things and dramatically bring down the cost of the problem with that is that they're selling to the law firms, which is good. which is nothing wrong with that. And the law firms are keeping the margins that are going on there.
Right. They're very good at that. They're very good at that.
So the world tells us that that isn't a sustainable situation. So, but what is going to happen? The question is really whether the law firms remain a bottleneck or not. And they've got a good chance. They've got a good chance to do that. They've done very well for a long period of time. But you see some of the functions, wills, contracts, real estate contracts, all sorts of things starting to move out of that. My message, and I wrote a previous book, also published by MIT Press, called The Disruption Dilemma, is that, the fact that something's been an incumbent for a long period of time is not a signal that they're ripe for disruption. It's a signal that they have something that is very hard to disrupt. That's what the takeaway from that is. And even though you can see a lot of things that look like waste, etc., that doesn't mean they still don't have something that is essential. And so it's not clear it's all going to go in your favor. It's not clear that it's so easy to disrupt.
Well, we have a lot more viewer questions. I'm afraid we don't have time for them, but I assume a large part of this audience will be looking forward to your book tomorrow. I really would, really interested to know where you see the opportunity and how economics play out in COVID-19. Joshua, thank you for joining us today. Very grateful for your time and your thoughts, and look forward to seeing what you have to say tomorrow.
Thank you.